अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाज़रीन, वेलकम टू आज आपके साथ। मैं हूं जहांगीर इलाही, आपका होस्ट। Our conversation today is on entrepreneurship and investing in Pakistan. For this discussion, we have with us today in the studio two distinguished guests who were focused on both entrepreneurship and investing in Pakistan in the past. We will also be covering an event at Morgan Stanley, which is hosted by Morgan Stanley and Abraj Capital in Midtown Manhattan, where we will actually have a chance to interview some of the panelists as well as some of the guests who are in attendance at the show. Going back to our guests, our first guest with us today in the studio is Mr. Javed Hamid, who is currently a senior advisor at IESC as well as IGI Financial Services Group. His work experience includes a long tenure at the World Bank with the IFC and has been a director for East Asia and the Pacific region. He also was instrumental in founding the Lahore University of Management Sciences, which is also known as LUMS. Our second guest with us today is Mr. Carlos Cashman, who is often referred to as a serial entrepreneur and has started several companies since his time at MIT. His first company went public in 2000. It was by the name of Opus 360 and was acquired within a year after its IPO. He later started in 2009 a company by the name of ConstellationCK, which he is a founder and CEO of and has significant interest in Pakistan, and its focus is mainly online advertising. So I welcome both of you to the studio. Thank you so much for taking the time for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So Mr. Javed, I'm going to start off the discussion with you. And the questions for you is generally, it's a little bit broad, but what are your thoughts on some of the current landscape in Pakistan and the biggest challenges that we're facing, especially from a business and investing standpoint?
Okay, well, I think everybody knows that the political situation and the security situation and the economic situation in Pakistan is quite difficult, and it has been for some time now. And so that underpins all sort of view of Pakistan from outside, and that things are difficult.
The first thing in the news that you hear is
the first thing in the news you hear, and first thing people are almost afraid to go there and all that sort of thing. But if you go to Pakistan and you see what's going on over there, what you're struck by is that there is a lot of activity. You just drive just outside the big cities, leave alone the big cities, just drive outside the big cities, and you see that there's a lot of small businesses all along the routes, and they're functioning, and they're trucks, and they're movement. And so
what kind of small business have you
These are all kinds of consumer goods that they're producing. They're producing like fruits and vegetables, they're processing, and they're air conditioners, they're assembling, and white goods, all kinds of things. And the thing is, what strikes you is that there's kind of many economies working in Pakistan at the same time. And but I think there are two major issues that really are a constraint on actually business being done effectively and these people. One is the availability of power, energy, and that's a major issue. And if you have power being cut off or load shedding or things like that, the businesses, they really can't run.
They can't function, they can't produce.
They cannot be efficient, they cannot compete, and this has a demoralizing effect. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, that investors, they are sort of like animal spirits, and you get excited and you want to invest. But if you are constantly being sort of beaten down by something that you really don't have much control over, then you begin to lose heart. And so that's one thing. And the second thing is, I just want to say briefly, is that it is the enforcement of contracts, which is a very major issue in
so what do you mean by that?
I mean that that if you have you agree to provide me with something, and we have a contract, we write it up, and you don't deliver
on it.
The
legal framework is
legal
lacking.
Framework exists, but to enforce them, to take it to court, and to get a judgment and to get on with it, that is where people get stuck. And there's a report that is done by the World Bank on doing business in Pakistan, and I was just looking at the most recent one, and Pakistan is so low in terms of these two things: energy, availability of electricity, as they call, and enforcement of contracts. And these are the two things that really make business people demoralize them. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Thanks for highlighting them. I think we'll address, despite this, there'll be opportunities for people to do business, and how we can address maybe some of these issues further along in the discussion. Carlos, as an American entrepreneur, despite some of the stuff that Mr. Javed mentioned, you have been successful in Pakistan in starting a business there, and you're continuing to grow there. Could you just tell us a little bit about your experience and what kind of motivated you to go into Pakistan and start in the technology business?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the big differences is if what market you're addressing. If you're addressing the internal Pakistan market, or you're addressing markets in the U.S. or Western Europe or wherever. And my company is an internet company. I look at all this stuff from a technical point of view and technical lens. And an internet company can be based anywhere. People love to say on the internet, no one knows who you are, whatever you're doing, but they also don't know where you're building things. It doesn't really necessarily, it's not key to the business, all the businesses. I mean, so for me, I got involved in Pakistan because I was connected through some friends from MIT to a fantastic entrepreneur who built a great business there called Sofizar. And that's the business that Zafar Khan had started. And that became ConstellationCK when we met and decided to go into business together. But what we are doing is addressing internet marketing, and almost all of our customers are here in the United States, and we work extremely effectively. And there are challenges, like there are challenges anywhere. I've started 6 or 7 companies. There are challenges here in the States when you start a company. I have not found any challenges to be so insurmountable or so much more difficult in Pakistan than they are here. I mean, the power problems are issues, but you solve them. The perception problem in the media, there's a bit of an issue with that.
And you've been to Pakistan a number of times.
I've been to Pakistan many times.
And you have been able to overcome some of the fears. And
I took my wife there so that early on, so we could both go and enjoy it and see how, what a wonderful place it is. I mean, I've done business in the Middle East too. I've done business all around the world. And there's a lot of, particularly in the West, there's a lot of media perception of, that's worse than it really is when you get out there in the real world.
Of course, I mean, in anything.
Yeah, in anything. You find that people everywhere generally just want to get on with their life. They just want to, go to work, have a job they enjoy and they're proud of, and feed their family. And that's what's most important. And so that stuff, when you can get there and see that,
you move past some of your fears.
You move past it very quickly.
So one thing I think I want to come back to, and it was the issue of power and the energy sector. I know, Mr. Javed, you have spent a bunch of time in the 90s developing the power sector and the energy sector in Pakistan through when you were at the IESC. How is our challenge today different than what it was in the 90s? And what are some of the solutions that you could maybe guide us towards, and how can we resolve some of these issues that we have?
Well, I think in the 90s, the issue was that there was not enough generation capacity. And therefore, a framework was set in place to encourage people, private sector, to invest in the generation of power. And a very effective and simple framework was set in place, which actually became a model for many countries. And that was to set a single tariff, and then anybody who wants to be able to supply electricity at that tariff would actually say, all right, I'll do it, and they would invest and do that. And so and a lot of investment actually came into Pakistan rapidly. From abroad and from domestic. I mean, there were domestic players, and they joined up with foreigners, and there was foreign investment coming, and they were joined.
So they set up these power plants and plugged back into the grid.
Yeah, I mean, these power plants are private, and there were large power plants, 100 megawatt, 200 megawatts, and they started to produce, and then they plugged into the grid. And they, in fact, there was at that time a fear that there was an oversupply of power and things like that.
Which is good. I mean, I've heard there have been times that we can export power to India.
That was it. But I think the problem today is somewhat different. And the problem today is that it is a problem of management. There is quite a lot of capacity. Maybe all of it is a little bit not as effective as it can be. Some is old capacity, etc. But what is happening is that there are two things. One, that state enterprises and the government agencies, etc., they take power from from the supplier, and then they don't pay them, they don't have the ability to pay, and that creates a gridlock, because then they cannot supply.
They won't supply.
Can't. And then the producers can't get oil because they can't pay them, and then the oil people can't get import the oil because they're not being paid.
So how do we overcome? I think people have always mentioned that the biggest issue now is in the power sector. You know, you have folks like WAPTA who are not paying on time, right? So the producers don't want to produce, or they can't produce.
They can't produce.
So what would be to how can you break that gridlock?
Well,
and
I mean,
with wearing your IESC hat or something.
No, I think again, it's difficult to go into details in like this, but essentially, it's a problem, one of the willingness to do it, that you say, all right, this is a problem, we're going to solve it, and if there is some political cost to it, if there is some people have to get up and pay their bills, well, we are going to make it happen.
And make them accountable.
And make them accountable. Second thing is that there's a lot of loss of power in terms of through stealing and through people not paying their bills and people stealing power, etc. Again, everybody knows the problem. It can be, we have the talent and the expertise in Pakistan for people to actually deal with that problem, but again, it gets locked in with this political thing. There's certain areas you can't force people to pay, or there's certain types of people you can't force them to pay. So I think my feeling is that if you actually have a willingness to tackle this problem and really, it's important, because this is not a problem like we must have better security. Well, you know, there's very little you can do if people are rushing in from Afghanistan or there's a war going on, you know, but this is not, I don't think it is a problem that it's a much more manageable problem if you really apply your management skill and government's attention to it from that perspective. So this is my...
No, I think that's helpful, and I think I'm going to actually highlight or go on to one thing that you mentioned here. You did say that we have the talent and the resource to be able to fix this. And I think with that, my question to you, Carlos, is somewhat related, but not really. It's focused on talent. And I want to understand, firstly, your issues with the electricity or power. I mean, how have you overcome them? And then the second part is, how has your business, you mentioned that you had a lot of talent that you found in Pakistan. And can you just briefly talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the power question is an interesting one, because there are macro and micro solutions to that problem.
Yeah.
And almost every emerging market that is coming, particularly as the IT world has been tied together in the last 20 years, and outsourcing, et cetera, has gotten bigger and bigger, people solve these problems. I mean, it's a problem, but as I said, it's not such a big or different problem of things I encounter here when I started companies in the US. So, we got generators. I mean, I have to pay for a generator. We have to pay for fuel for the generator. But, as long as your business, it's just an issue of productivity. As long as I can keep my systems up and people are productive, and we keep consistent power, it's not really a problem. So it's not something that I even have to think about. It's largely taken care of. And that's a sort of what I say, a micro solution. I'm not the only company doing this. There are,
households are doing it. Everybody's doing it. Everybody does it.
That's what's
who can afford it?
Bright people who are, want to get something done find solutions. And so the market has found micro solutions. Now, if you're doing a very large plant that has other issues, maybe you got to build your own power station. I don't know, there's other problems. But in the IT and internet world, it's and in the homes, like I said, it's very solvable, and I think has been addressed largely. And like I said, there's talent. I mean, there's talent to do that, and there's talent to do everything that we're doing there. I mean, I found the resources, and the people are fantastic. I mean, as good as anywhere I've worked with. I mean, the schools are great there. And the technical resources are really top notch, and we've also built structured an organization at Constellation where we can actually also train people as well. So we can bring people in and train them into what we do and teach them how to do internet marketing and things like that we do.
Excellent. Thank you. That's actually been very helpful. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a short break. We will be back right after these messages. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, before the break, we were talking about entrepreneurship and investing in Pakistan. Let's get right back to the discussion. So, Mr. Javed, I know we kind of briefly touched on some of the issues and the challenges around in Pakistan. I know we're somewhat time concerned, so I really want to get to a crux of the discussion, which is what are the opportunities that you see in Pakistan from an entrepreneurship and an investment standpoint? And not only for Pakistanis who are, they want to be part of the growth and development of Pakistan, but from purely an entrepreneurial spectrum or investment spectrum, what would you kind of highlight and want to talk about?
Okay, I'm going to take you through 4 or 5 sectors which I think are particularly attractive for investment in Pakistan at the moment. Pakistan is a country with 180 million people, and there's quite a lot of buying power in Pakistan, and that's become increased because of agricultural prosperity, high agricultural prices globally, etc. And Pakistan is a big agricultural economy, so that has given quite a stimulus to the economy and to demand for products. So the first thing I would say is that the agriculture sector itself, and one should look at it, and this agri-processing, production, and there's a whole slew of things that can happen.
For example, is interesting, but the issue is, I mean, the agribusiness, isn't it generally predominantly owned and run by a handful of people, or you think there's opportunities with the tertiary businesses that?
The agribusiness is when, for example, you can look at a dairy. And
okay.
so dairy, yes, there may be a big Nestle who are a big sort of processor, but there are lots of people who provide the milk. So therefore, there's a whole chain. There's a chilling station, there's collection, there's transportation. So there's a whole chain around that. Then fruits and vegetables. Pakistan is a big country for production of fruits and vegetables. Most of it doesn't get processed, so there is an opportunity over there that to invest in that. Then there's a lot of investment required in post-harvest, cold storages, and again handling and distribution. So this is one big area. The second area is health. Again, there's a population, there's a big population, and the demand for health services is growing very rapidly, and therefore there is this opportunity for clinics, for retail distribution. There's a lot of things that have to be done in that area, and it's very fragmented at the moment, and therefore there are lots of opportunities for investment in the area. The third area is education. And again, education, we talked a little bit, but again, it's a very big area because a lot of investment can take place in training people, certification,
so education,
healthcare, energy. Energy is not only a big power plant, but renewable energy. And again, this can be from waste.
There's a lot of work being done in the solar sector with home installation kits, as well as even the UPS is being charged by solar panels, so things like that.
So there's a lot of opportunity in that, and then there's also in waste management, because cities throw up a lot of waste, and you can recycle that into energy, etc. So that's it. One final thing before one can carry on is that the trade with India is opening up.
Well,
and that is a big opportunity also, and people should think about it, because the northern part of India, the markets over there are further away from their own southern part than from being supplied from Pakistan,
from Punjab
from the Punjab, and therefore already there is demand for cement and fertilizer and products like that, and so therefore this is another opportunity. And IT is a very important area, because
and we have Carlos here, so
he can talk about how do we link between that opportunity, and then there's opportunity from Afghanistan. If there is some settlement over there, that's the market where Pakistan can supply. In fact,
people are already, but everything's being done on the cash basis.
It's the biggest supplier to
Afghanistan. Yes,
so these are so there's a lot of things that can be done. There is a big opportunity.
So I'll come back to you to ask a follow-up question, but I do want Carlos to just tell me a little bit about the information technology sector and high tech and what the opportunities you see there. And then I'll come back to you because I want to talk about market access. How do we access that market to be able to participate in this? So
tell you a little bit about it would be tough. I can tell you a lot about it.
Well, then
a lot to say. From my view, where I'm looking at it, it's just super, super exciting right now. I think Mark Andreessen wrote an article called "Why Software is Eating the World" or "How Software Will Eat the World." He and his firm have written a few pieces on this, but it is totally true. Software is, in a sense, eating the world, and it's becoming inherent to everything we do. It's in your phone, it's in your car, it's on the computers, it's on the web. And
everything about you is on something or somewhere.
And it all takes technology to tie it together. And this software can be built anywhere. Okay, I mean, let's look at companies like Instagram, right? We all saw this acquired for 8 people for $1 billion. There's no reason Instagram couldn't have been built in Lahore. No reason for that. Now, and that was $1 billion in wealth creation overnight.
The guys who made Angry Birds almost.
Angry Birds
is
in
billion
Finland. Yeah, well, it's even growing more beyond that. So, like Airbnb, I mean, there's a business that's throwing off cash flow. I mean, they're going to be doing 9 figures in cash a year, like, and growing. It's got a $2 billion valuation, for what that's worth, whatever, from an investment. But all these, I mean, I could name there's hundreds, if not thousands, of internet marketing firms that can be anywhere in the world, and many of them are already.
And the good thing that I think we talked about before too is we have the talent.
Yep.
We have the language proficiency,
which is very important, actually.
Yes.
And those two things are a huge piece to showing that this can happen anywhere. So from an investment perspective, and then there's a cost arbitrage opportunity. I mean, it just costs less in Pakistan to do the same thing. You also, in business in general, internet business, cost has come down dramatically in the last 10 years. I mean, exponentially it has dropped. From when I started my company in 1999 and we were building a website that needed to scale to 1 million users, we had to pay about $1 million to get in the game, just for software licenses, for hardware, for the talent to make sure all this stuff was running. Today, the cost for that is zero. It's free. When you're launching a business, you get on Amazon Web Services, on any of these cloud services, and you don't need to pay until you start to have some success. And there's trial plans for all this stuff. So it's free or zero. It's near to zero as it matters. So anyone can get in the game and start this stuff and try things out. And so if you're encouraged, like I see a big opportunity to encourage the entrepreneurial spirit and ventures in the IT software entrepreneurs in Pakistan. And they can address any market in the world. And I think it's just they've had trouble accessing. And when I speak over there and I talk to people at school, they have trouble accessing these markets, getting to the U.S. market and dealing with them here.
So we can partner with them to bring them.
We could partner to bring them here and also getting investment. It takes very little investment. We could put a small amount of money to work across hundreds of companies. And if you have one moderate success out of that, moderate by U.S. standards, a $50 million sale or something, you pay off the fund 10 times over or something. I mean,
absolutely.
So the opportunity is really big right now.
That's very helpful. And I think, Mr. Javed, I wanted to ask you about how can we actually access, I mean, there's an issue with the act, there's a lot of interesting things that you've talked about, but say our viewers who are sitting internationally, have some family ties or don't, are foreigners, and are interested in actually going and doing this. How do you do that? How do you facilitate that? What can we do and what can they do to actually access some of these opportunities?
Well,
I know there's no right answer.
That really is where it becomes challenging. And first of all, people have to feel that there is an opportunity, and if they feel that, they have to go and look in the particular sector that they're interested in. Carlos is talking about IT sector, and he saw an opportunity in that, and they went and they looked and they formed a partnership. So I think that's what you need to do. That you see the sector, focus on it. This is what we are good at doing. This is what we know. Go and look what the how the land lies in that particular thing. Form some partnerships locally, and then you can invest. It's like any new market you go to, you have to do that. Yes, it may be a little
due diligence, obviously.
Due diligence is needed. Access to finance is a problem. Again, that also presents some opportunity that people can set up some businesses like private equity business, funds we were just talking about, and things like that to provide access to finance for people who want to invest in those sectors in which
and a lot of studies, whether they're at institutes of higher learning here that have been done about Pakistan, and the issue with emerging companies is financing. The lack of small and medium enterprises having the ability to finance themselves to grow, and I think the capital they need is probably not that much.
Yeah, and the private sector can provide that, and therefore that is an opportunity to develop those companies and invest in those companies. And there's a lot of skill available in the US, in fact, for doing that kind of thing, and it is certainly an opportunity that should be looked into.
No, absolutely. Carlos, I guess, again, we are relatively short on time, but what I want to ask you, and I just want to get to this is maybe a more general question, not only in Pakistan. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs? I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You must have had, I'm sure you've had successes, but you've also must have had failures. And how do you overcome them as an entrepreneur? And just generally advice of that. And also, some of the stuff you are aggressive in pursuing opportunities, whether you go into Pakistan or not. I mean, that shows a certain trait, but just if there's a general advice that you could give entrepreneurs who are watching and potential investors? What would it
I
be?
mean, the measure of success is certainly not, it's how many times you get up after failing. It's not how many times you fail. And you're going to. You have to experiment. You have to try things. I mean, you have to have a certain bit of craziness that's letting you, makes you willing to believe in your idea when everyone else tells you it's not going to work. Because that's almost, it almost always happens. Not everyone has vision. Even if it's the vision to start a store on the corner selling produce, there are people who will tell you it can't work, or if you want to start the next Instagram, there will be people who tell you it can't work. Yeah. You can't. You have to persist. You have to go after. You got to find ways to succeed. And you know what I mean. Again, everything I look at is colored through the lens of the internet, but that has sort of flattened the world in a lot of ways.
It has. I mean, it's had accessibility.
Accessibility changes.
Accessibility has tremendously changed. One thing you mentioned to me prior to this show, and I'm going to ask you and put you on the spot now. You said, Pakistanis are generally very secretive as it comes to sharing their success stories and how they succeeded. Can I ask you what was their ingredient to success and what made you succeed where others had failed in certain businesses? And what was what are the ingredients? What does it take?
Luck is a big part of it. I'll take measures of luck any day over everything. No, it's persistence. Persistence. I mean, I guess people say you make your own luck, and that really comes down to persistence, right? Just staying at it. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Every business I've started, I mean, only one of them kind of just took off and was one of those very lucky, rare, moonshots. But the rest of them there's ups and downs constantly. I mean, there are days you wake up and the world's against you, and you feel like you're never going to succeed, and you have to persist through that. And there are times you'll lose your biggest client. It'll be 80% of your revenue, and you feel like the world's over, and you got paychecks to make and all that. But that's what makes you, if you have that persistence, that's what makes you great, and that's what makes success. Right, is staying after something and finding the solutions to these problems, because you're always going to have problems. I mean, it's funny when I do this now. I advise a lot of companies. I do a lot of angel investing, and people always kind of laugh at how relaxed I am about stuff going on, even my own company or whatever, because I have seen every problem you can imagine. I've done so many companies, 6, 7, 8 companies, and you always have trouble. You always have problems. You always have growing pains. You always have customer issues. None of that stuff is surprising. It's how you respond to it and how you overcome those problems, which will define your success.
And persistence, I think, you're right, is probably the most important thing, because you're going to find a lot of challenges. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to move on to Mr. Javed. And again, I think it's probably the last question that I can ask you. And if it's not the right question, you can give me a different answer. But I wanted to ask you, just to highlight some things. I mean, look, I think the issue with Pakistan are foreign direct investments are dwindling. I think they're kind of on a downturn. We've had issues getting capital flow to Pakistan, and whether with your a wealth of experience in dealing with Pakistan, what can we do, and whether it's the government level, whether it's private citizens, how can we better help flow capital to Pakistan in a lot of the sectors that are needed that can basically catapult us in growth, in GDP growth, and whatever to the next level. So what would be your advice on that?
Well, this is a tough one, and I'll give you an example, which I used to work on China a lot, and they've had phenomenal success with attracting foreign direct investment. They have $50 billion coming in every year and things like that. And what they basically do, several things they do right, but a couple of things that strike you. One is that the local officials, the governors of the provinces and this and that, one of the measuring thing for them is how much investment you've attracted to your particular province. So therefore they are focused on this is an important thing to attract foreign investment.
So it's a measure of success as being a successful local.
But that conveys to people that it's important. In Pakistan, if you ask 100 people in the government and different places, I don't know what answer you'll get, but I don't think everybody is so focused that foreign investment is something that we are very important that should be coming into this thing. And second thing is that, foreign investor, when it comes in, if you can facilitate sanctions and permissions and make it a little bit easier, they are attracted to that environment because they feel that they'll be able to do business over there.
Yes.
And so a couple of things is that you basically have a philosophy that you want to be an attractive place for people to do business, and that is what the government can do. It's not a lot of investment you want to make, it's a mental attitude, and if you do that and put some effort into it, and then you create they have one window operation.
They have the board of investment is doing things like that.
Yeah, but things still get stuck up, and because there is not everybody is not pulling that. Yes, this is important. So, but this would be the way I would characterize it, is that it has to be a feeling amongst everybody who touches a foreign investment in some way, is that this is important for Pakistan. Let's do our bit for making it happen.
Yeah, and maybe if I can, if it's okay with you, I can add something. I think more importantly, I think we ourselves as Pakistanis, whether they're living abroad, should be able to step up and put some skin in the game. If we're not willing to support the industries, whether we're expat Pakistanis or Pakistanis living abroad, or whatever it is, if we're not able to, or willing and committing to put skin in the game to see and improve the landscape of our country, why should we expect others to step up for us? And I think sometimes there's often that perception that, we need somebody else to invest. No, why don't you do something yourself and then get other people interested?
Yeah.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Javed, Hamid, and Carlos. The pleasure having you on the show. We are now actually on our way back to Morgan Stanley, where we're going to be at the event. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break. Please don't go anywhere. We will be now shooting the rest of the show from Morgan Stanley, where we'll hope to have some coverage from the event, as well as interviews with panelists, as well as guests who are in attendance. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this break. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We just attended a conference here in New York, in Midtown Manhattan, at Morgan Stanley's office. It was the topic of the discussion has been entrepreneurship and investing in Pakistan, co-hosted by Abraj Capital and coordinated by Partners of a New Beginning. And this has been an exceptionally interesting discussion, really focused on helping capital flow to Pakistan with the right people here, with folks from the USAID, private investors, Pakistani representatives, and it's been a very interesting and exceptionally interesting conversation this evening.
Notably, the replacement of President Musharraf, the assassination of Benazir, and the deteriorating security situation. What that's done is to drastically reduce the amount of investment that has gone into the economy, and the economy ever since has been growing at a more modest 3% or less.
If you want to hold a symposium on security on Pakistan, you can get 300 people, no problem. But if you want to hold something on entrepreneurship investment in Pakistan, you probably struggle to get only 3 or 10 people. So we started from kind of that position, and then we eventually built to quite a successful event, as it's turning out. And as it happened, the unlikely thing happened, Hurricane Sandy, which was completely unexpected. And I was in Boston the weekend before, and I was praying, no, God knows that doesn't happen. Similarly, I'm sure the Pakistani entrepreneurs, when on the verge of success, they are overcome by a challenge and hence face failure and frustration. But then are coming back in a way is a testament to some of the successful Pakistani entrepreneurs that Tom mentioned. The 6 of them, some of them are over here. Yusuf Jan is here, Carlos is here. We're going to hear from them. And in a way, we are here to recognize that in spite of some of the very deep and some very grave challenges that the country faces, they are still there. They are the true economic stakeholders in the country, in the sense that they are rooted in the country and they are not leaving the country.
Actually, Imran introduced me to Zafar Khan, who had won the first MIT Open Business Plan competition. But I wanted to grow his business, and I just sold my company to the Washington Post, and I was looking for something to do. We were both in the internet search market, so he connected us, and then when we decided to come together and form Constellation. As far as experience in working in Pakistan, I mean, obviously, I've done international startups. I've been advisors to companies started in Georgia, oil companies. We're looking for 6 months for a person in the valley. So but in Pakistan, I can hire teams of people relatively easily. Now, once we've solved the problems of infrastructure and in trading and onboarding, all that kind of stuff, which we have, we've got our building, we've got our infrastructure taken care of. now we have an asset. That in itself is a really great asset. And I see it as just huge opportunity because the cost of doing business are fundamentally, that's the basic advantage right now. It's literally 85% lower. I mean, it's almost 1/10.
In Pakistan, what happened was, more than 5-6 years ago, basically some of my colleagues at MIT Sloan were invited by USAID to come in and assess the entrepreneurial opportunities in Pakistan. So they did, and we were all talking about it, and we figured that okay, there was actually a fair amount of opportunity, but we weren't quite sure how real it was, right? Everyone said the right things. So what we did was we started with something small. We started by providing executive education courses in Pakistan. So these were the same courses that are taught at MIT Sloan School for, $5,000, but we subsidized them 90%. So we started with that, and then, folks who took the classes said, we want more. We don't want to just take classes. We want you to actually help us with, real companies. So then we looked at starting this whole business acceleration plan. Now, initially the idea was to do a business plan competition, and then we said, no, that doesn't make sense because there's enough startups. What we found in Pakistan was that there were a lot of companies that had sort of plateaued at a few $100,000 or maximum $1 million. So we said, let's look at acceleration of companies that have plateaued. How do you accelerate their growth and get them to be 20, 40, $100 million companies, because that's really what's needed. And we focused on the ICT sector because that's what we do best at MIT and across a lot of the open folks. And that's what we started with. So the whole idea was we found about 40 companies every year that had high growth potential. We took them through a fairly rigorous process.
I started Mixit in 2004. So we caught it pretty much at a good time based on the previous gentleman's presentation. Pakistan was on the upswing. But I did think about it very hard when Yusuf suggested we set up a development facility in Pakistan. I actually said, should I go see a psychiatrist before I invest in this? But it turned out to be an amazing experience, amazing people, just a fantastic experience for all of us. So what we did was we set up a development facility, and I built the U.S. business from a business standpoint, selling and setting up an operation. So it worked very well having someone on the ground familiar with the environment in Pakistan, Yusuf, who took care of building the facility, hiring people, and hiring really tremendous software engineers. I was really impressed with the capability and the commitment of the people that we hired. Very little turnover, which is a problem in other countries. And we built a business over the next 8 years. And we focused on the financial services industry, developing transaction software for trading electronically. So we sold to brokers, banks, anyone who was trading equities and equity options. And we also built a network connecting all the exchanges and sources of liquidity in the U.S. So we built a very successful business and we grew it over time. And then we decided we want to take it to the next level. And we went out and did a bidding process and talked to about a dozen companies who might be interested in buying our company or partnering with us. And we found a firm called Pat Systems in the UK. They had a global presence in the derivative space. And we felt that we could take our U.S. presence, marry it with the global presence, and take our whole business to another level. So we did a transaction with them and sold the company. And subsequent to that, Pat Systems didn't have a very good experience. MF Global was one of their big customers. Their stock price took a hit. And the company was then bought by Ion Trading. So now we're part of the Ion Group. But we started a facility in Pakistan, in Karachi, and it was just a fantastic experience. We dealt with all the issues along the way, but we managed all the risks. The power issues, reliable internet, people getting to work during strikes. But we managed that all, and we always had a game plan for emergencies. What would happen if this happened? What would happen if that happened? We always said, what if? And if you do that and you manage your risks, things work out well.
It requires on the part of the government to see what it can do, seize on these opportunities, how to support the people who are interested in coming to invest in Pakistan. I'll give you a quick example since Harris was speaking about this OPEC and OPEC project. I have been assisting a project which is for renewable energy, relatively small, about $24–25 million, based on sugar cane waste. And it's somewhere about 100 miles from Karachi. And OPEC is financing it, and it's just sort of basically, so it's a very good project. And what I see is that it's been almost 2 years that this has been going through the process of different approvals and sanctions and things. Now, it's a regulated industry. This is a new industry, and therefore one can understand. But still, there is no sense of urgency on the part of the counterparts in the government who are supposed to set the tariffs and set the conditions for this to happen. I would imagine that somebody is bringing in $25 million. OPEC is sponsoring it. I used to work on China for a long time, and I can tell you that when a foreign investor landed in China, the governor of that particular province would make sure that his PR team was out there, received him like a king, and treated him so well that those people did not want to leave. And that was basically the philosophy on which they were attracting. And this was a country which was attracting more than $50 billion of foreign investment. They were not so desperate. Everybody wanted to get in there. But still, that was the approach and attitude. This is what I want to say to my colleagues in the government, that has to be the approach.
That is true. That the system back home has not been able to hold investments as much as it should, and this has been particularly true for the past 2–3 years, or perhaps 4 years. But I think if you were to look at what the government is doing, one of the most important things that has been done and will start to show results also is the strengthening of the regulatory mechanisms. Because we have created the autonomy of the state bank and giving them the autonomy in terms of framing the monetary policy, and also both on the information side as well as the Security and Exchange Commission. All these regulatory bodies are trying to create the enabling environment that would ensure the kind of due process that you need to sustain investment and to retain investment in the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with the Deputy Ambassador to the United States, Mr. Asad Majid Khan. Do you want to make a couple of comments on this event as well as your thoughts about entrepreneurship and investing in Pakistan?
I think I am absolutely delighted to be here and to hear what I heard. Really, with such good representation from US businesses, and also importantly from the State Department, from USAID, from OPIC. So I really see the private sector as well as the US government and public sector represented here to discuss about possibilities and opportunities in Pakistan. I was particularly encouraged by the presentation made by the representative of the Abraj Group, listing all the good stories from Pakistan. Really, I mean, in some ways he stole my statement. I had kind of shortened my statement, realizing that this was a different format and perhaps there is not enough time to read the whole statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Tom Speechley from Abraj Capital, who's a co-host of this event tonight. Just want to get some comments from you, Tom, about your interest in Pakistan and as well as your interest in hosting this event. Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, the Abraj Group has been investing in Pakistan for a few years now, so we're always keen to help support the Pakistani diaspora and initiatives to support the economic development there. So it's great to be here, and it's great that Morgan Stanley hosted the event. We're very happy to be here.
Well, my belief about Pakistan is what Allama Iqbal said, several years ago, कि ज़रा नम हो तो ये मट्टी बड़ी ज़रखेज़ है साकी. That's our firm belief about Pakistan. And when I started my company 4 years ago, we chose Pakistan as our development center, and our entire software was built in Pakistan. So there's a lot of talent, and what we need to do is really provide what you're talking about, the connectivity with not just the intellectual capital, but also the markets and the insights from the industry. Because there's a lot of raw talent there, which needs to be challenged properly. And that's what we can provide from here in terms of, where's the demand, what kinds of things will be moving forward, and so that they get them to focus on those trends as opposed to just going around randomly in terms of what they're pursuing.
What implications, if any, do you think it'll have in the short to long term in facilitating capital flow to Pakistan?
Well, it's always great to see this much interest from a diverse group of people in investing in Pakistan. So that's always a great encouraging to see that. Whether it translates into direct business, we'll obviously have to see. Certainly, if it can facilitate introductions between people, if folks, for example, are having trouble getting visas and they can have visas, that will certainly help in terms of trade flow.
We had Carlos on our show, and he was telling me on the way over that
right.
that if visas are
exactly. So I think these sorts of things is great. I was glad to see the interest in New York, especially with a premier place like Morgan Stanley. There's obviously the perception problem that has to be addressed. Absolutely. But if we can highlight more of these kinds of success stories in the mainstream media here, that will definitely help. And I think that's one of the things that we do at Open as well, which is to highlight success stories of Pakistani entrepreneurs in Pakistan. But obviously, we need to do more of that.
Summarize some of the key discussion points here, which is probably very clear if you're a Pakistani, that the image that we have abroad is generally perpetuated by the media, whereas on the ground, business opportunities are really quite ample, and there is still a lot of opportunity for investors as well as entrepreneurs to do successful business in Pakistan. So with that, I bid you for farewell. Please give us your comments and send us your comments at ajtv@usa.com. That's ajtv@usa.com. Thank you, and have a good night.